Hi everyone, welcome to another Gypsy Nurse Live event. I'm Rachel Alton, the online community manager for the Gypsy Nurse, and today we have the Gypsy Nurse's CEO, Steve Curtin, and Trish Richardson from Relias. Trish is the Director of Post-Acute Care Solutions for Relias, as well as a registered nurse with 30 years of business and healthcare experience, including numerous leadership positions in clinical education, operations, management, and oversight for countless successful organizational change initiatives. She's here today to discuss the benefits of having a travel nurse guide, which we all know it's so important. She will walk you through all of the things that you need to do. You will walk away from the session confident with the knowledge that you are not alone in your travels. So thank you so much, Trish, for joining us. Thank you, Steve, for coming on as well.
Hey, Rachel. Hey, Trish. Great to see you. Trish, thanks so much for joining us today. This is fantastic. We really appreciate your time here today with the Gypsy Nurse.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. No, so thank you, Rachel and Steve, and everybody at the Gypsy Nurse for giving me the opportunity to speak to your incredible audience, my fellow nurses from around the country. So I'm really excited to be with you all. And a little fun fact about me as well. So before I got into nursing, I'm actually a second career nurse. I was actually a stockbroker. So you're going to hear me mention a little bit about insider information later. So there's a reference to Wall Street. But I'm also the president-elect of the North Carolina Nurses Association and a state delegate for the American Nurses Association. So I am very passionate about all things nursing, and I continue to volunteer today with the Office of Emergency Management. You'll hear me talk about that a little bit and my volunteer experience during the pandemic. So speaking of, so before we jump in, I do want to take a second and just recognize where we've been and where we are today. And we've been battling COVID for a little over 2 years now. And I can honestly tell you, friends, I never thought that we'd be living in the midst of a global pandemic in my lifetime. And we have shown strength and resilience in the face of the biggest public health crisis in over 100 years. We've offered grace and compassion to our patients, to our residents, to our colleagues, and to our communities. Thank you. Thank you for your dedication and your grit and your sacrifice and so much more. Your incredible offerings of yourselves during this pandemic journey. You see, all of you have intentionally stepped in to support all of us in ways most of us could never even imagine. You have boldly walked into uncharted territories or hospitals, and you no doubt have had questions and needed direction in your new work environment. And so I mentioned a little earlier, throughout the pandemic, I have been a registered nurse volunteer with the Office of Emergency Management, Capital Area Medical Reserve Corps here in North Carolina. And I remember all too well those very early days volunteering in the nursing homes, desperate to find and don my PPE, working short-staffed alongside other volunteers and wondering, how in the world are we going to get through today? I've cared for nursing home residents and administered COVID vaccines across the state of North Carolina. And in fact, on February 11th of 2021, super early in the journey of the pandemic, I participated in Raleigh's first mass vaccination clinic at the PNC Arena, home of the Carolina Hurricanes. And I literally, you're going to laugh, but I literally ran up to the cars as they came through the line and I shouted, "Happy COVID vaccination day." I did. I got some crazy looks. But I mean, if you have an opportunity to say happy and COVID in the same sentence, I say, why not go for it, right? So let's go ahead and jump in. Before we get into our discussion, I do want to take just a moment to share a little bit about Relias. So Relias, we were founded in 2012, and we sit within the education group division of Bertelsmann, an international organization based out of Germany. And we are a team of healthcare and industry experts of about 1,000 employees strong, and we're bringing in more expertise every day. So think about your non-traditional development career paths, my friends. Think about that for a second. We also partner with more than 11,000 customer organizations in service of nearly 5 million caregivers around the world. And we are focused on the healthcare workforce activation, and our solutions go across all healthcare settings in support of clinicians at every stage along their career journey. And our goal is to help source and retain talent, elevate care quality, and improve risk mitigation efforts for our clients, all for the benefit of the patients that we care for every day. And you can see on the screen here, some of our clients include Common Spirit, the 5th largest hospital health system in the nation, and another, I think, is Texas Children's Health, also Virginia Mason, and many, many more. And we have cultivated strong collaborative partnerships as well with leading healthcare industry organizations. And I know many of you are familiar with A1 and, of course, ANCC and others. But we do this not only bring our products to market, but also to accredit our courses and safeguard that our content is relevant and up to date and offering that continuing education for all of you. And Relias we offer a family of brands here as well. On the screen, you'll see that we've been also recognized as market leaders for online learning, regulatory and compliance best practices, and we are so very proud to be considered one of the best places to work for the LGBTQ+ community. My friends, today, I want to show my support for you, my fellow nurses. While there are certainly peaks and valleys in travel nursing, yep, Steve, I borrowed that from your spring conference theme.
It sounds familiar, Trish.
Yep.
It sounds familiar. I like it.
I did. What I do want you all to know, my friends, you have someone on the inside, someone to guide you along the hills and valleys and the winding paths that await you. You see, my goal is that you walk away from our session today confident with the knowledge that you're not alone. So if you're ready, let's get started. A little bit too fast. Hold on. Here we go. So we're going to use a travel blog to highlight the specific events and questions that you all may have along your journey. Here are a few examples, just a few examples of what we're going to talk about today. You're moving to a new city. Well, which apartments or housing options are going to be closest to my hospital? And is my recruiter going to help me do any of this? You'll most likely locate the hospital or facility or center, right? Before orientation, get acclimated to the area and time that commute. But here's a question. Do you even know where you're going to park for orientation? And speaking of orientation, are you supposed to wear scrubs or is it business casual? And what exactly is business casual these days? Are you going to get a full 40-hour onboarding experience, or is it just going to be a couple of days? Or maybe one day, which is what we're seeing as unfortunately the norm during the pandemic. So how long do you really have before you hit the floor? How long are you going to get to work with a preceptor? Depending on your care area in a hospital, you may get 1 day, maybe 2 shifts. And here's something else. Who do you ask for when you get there? Is it going to be somebody from HR, my recruiter, my manager, or an educator maybe? And here's something else. Do they even know I'm coming? And what are the state regulations for staff to patient ratios? Do they even exist? How do I know what's right and when I'm looking at what the hospital is expecting of me? Where do I go? And who do I go to when I'm given what I feel is an unsafe patient assignment? Well, these are just a few of the topics that we're going to chat about today. And I can only imagine that these are probably just a handful of the questions that you've had in your careers. You see, I have walked millions of miles in my dance goes at the bedside, but I have not walked a single one in your shoes as a travel nurse during a global pandemic. And in my 30-year career, I've been a bedside nurse, charge nurse, a preceptor, a mentor, a manager, a clinical educator, and a director of clinical education with responsibility and for education and training for multiple service lines, plus the staffing response team where, wait for it, we onboarded you and your peers. I've been on the other side as your educator, and let me tell you, your go-to for all of these questions and more is your educator. Today, I want to share some insider information. Okay, here's the Wall Street kick here, which is okay in healthcare, but not on Wall Street. I want to empower you. I am passionate about empowering you in your everyday. My hope is that you walk away, again, knowing you have somebody on the inside who's going to assist you on the journey. Your clinical educator, you could say, is kind of your travel buddy. They are your champion and your guiding light as you continue your travels throughout the pandemic and beyond. So let's take a look at some specific tools and actions that you can take given certain situations that you might just run into. When I started thinking about how I would prepare this blog, I immediately thought of AAA. I remember years ago, and I'm probably dating myself talking about AAA, but I remember years ago, I'm driving to their offices to get advice on the best times to bring my family to visit Disney or, pricing out maybe a cruising vacation. And there was one surprise trip to Aruba that I took my husband on for his 40th birthday. Okay, that was a really long time ago, but you get where I'm going here. When I mapped out this blog, I used the AAA tour book as my guide. Here's the thing. AAA is committed to supporting their members by taking the guesswork out of vacation planning. They provide diamond insights for travelers. They give you expert insight into quality experience, cleanliness of the facility or the hotel or the resort. They talk about the range of amenities, things that you would experience there for your intended destination where you're planning to go. And they take great pride in being an exclusive and long trusted travel partner. And I actually remember quoting them. I think I wrote this down. They say, it's your dream vacation and you want to make the most out of it, right? So that's why you should travel with somebody you trust. AAA reports their members feel confident when traveling with their trusted partner to bring them the experience they need to help them on their next journey. Okay, so while your next assignment may not be a dream trip, as a clinical educator, I am your trusted partner with exclusive expertise. And while, okay, I don't have any diamonds that I can share with you, I can offer you some trip tips to help you become empowered in your everyday and successfully navigate your next travel experience. All right, so let's begin with the first entry in the travel blog, assignment received. So receiving your assignment can be nerve-wracking, and I liken it to when you're arriving your first day in a brand new school, not sure what you're going to be walking into. And there are a few things that we know will come along, and also so many questions that may arise. First up, think about your preparation and paperwork. Do I have the right scrubs? Will I need insurance? What exactly is my scope of practice in this state? Do I have copies of all my credentials? Did I pack my contract, my license, my certifications, my tax forms, my healthcare documentation, my social security card, my passport? Am I going to the Virgin Islands? Do I have my birth certificate and other insurance cards? And is my housing going to be close to the hospital? And how do I know it's really going to be in a safe area? And then what happens when my recruiter doesn't respond to any of my concerns and questions? Well, speaking of your recruiter relationship, this could very well be the most important relationship that you can have outside of the hospital. While they may be, well, are they going to be your recruiter for the entirety of your assignment? Do I need to complete any training with them before I head to orientation, or is it all going to be taken care of when I get to the hospital? Are they going to guarantee my hours? And are they going to mandate overtime? Okay, what happens when I get sick or I have a family emergency and I just can't make it to my shift or can't finish my assignment? There are so many questions here, and there are so many more that we're not going to be able to discuss today. But what I want you to think about is what happens if your recruiter is not responsive or just not available, just can't get back to you? What if you have ongoing issues with your agency or you just can't find a place to stay? Speaking of securing housing, finding and retaining housing is a critical step in preparing for your assignment. I mean, this we know you have to have a place to lay your head at night. What we may not know is if housing is going to be included in my contract or is that going to come out of my hourly pay? Will I have a roommate? And can I bring my cat? So I want another shout out to the Gypsy Nurse. You guys have a fantastic article out there discussing the ultimate travel nurse housing resource for the renter and the landlord. This is brilliant. You offer numerous other resources, including travel nurse housing websites. And I got another shout out for the crazy popular Gypsy Nurse Facebook group with articles and blogs that let you be a fly on the wall. I mean, who wouldn't want to know what the landlord is thinking about you? All right, so let's take a step back for a second.
Thanks, Trish, for the shout out, and that's why we're here, is to support travel nurses and provide them with resources. And so many of the topics that you're talking about and you just mentioned, I think people new to travel nursing just don't know these things, and it's in order to get off to a successful start, they need that information.
They do, 100%. And not having been a travel nurse, going out to your site and perusing the articles and loving some Facebook activity, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too here in a minute.
Right.
Really gives my peers, right, my travel nurse, sisters and brothers, all of you all out there, you have a foundation, you have a soft place to land, but also a solid starting point for your travel journey. And which brings us to, orientations on the horizon. You've got your assignment, right? Your contracts are signed, paperwork's in order, recruiter has confirmed your start date. Let's say you thankfully have a room that you've rented or an apartment and you can bring your cats, okay? So now you're either heading to the airport or the train station, or you're packing your car and heading out on the highway. So the next stop in the blog is onboarding. What should you be expecting when you arrive at the hospital? It really is unfamiliar territory. If this is the first time in a new hospital or facility, you're thinking, okay, here's day one. I know I need to arrive on this day. What time does orientation start?
Right.
We talked about it earlier. Where do I go? Do I need some hospitals, if not most now, have colors specific to the job role? Do I need to wear which color am I wearing, right? Am I going to wear, like in North Carolina for UNC, for nurses, it's seal blue. Or if you're a respiratory therapist, it's green. What colors, what am I wearing? I want to make sure I'm in alignment with this new building, new hospital that I'm in. Or will any scrub set do? Do they not have any mandates? Do I wear business casual on day one or for the entirety of orientation? And again, what exactly is business casual? Do I need to wear dress pants and a top, a sweater? Can I wear jeans and a nice shirt or a blazer and some boots? I mean, we just, these things you don't know, and you want to make the best impression coming in the door.
Yeah. And I can say, Trish, too, just if I may, I'm so happy you're touching on this particular component because, with our community of over 500,000 followers and registered members and so forth of our website and of our social platforms, this comes up so much. Frankly, the failure of successful onboarding, and you would think that the harder part would be, being on the floor or getting the assignment or what have you. But we see time and time and time again members of the community complaining about their onboarding experience and the lack of communication between the facility and between the agency and so forth. And again, you would think that that would be, in a way, the easy part, but we see an awful lot of bad onboarding experiences that get people off to a bad start or makes them reconsider travel nursing, saying, do I really, is every onboarding like this? So glad you're touching on this. And I know that you did this for much of your career.
I did. And so thank you so much for sharing that, because it really is. And we'll get into, probably, I think on this slide, talking about the lifeline on the inside, the things that I experience as an educator on the other side, right? I wanted to give you that perspective today,
Right.
because one of the things that I thought of when I was putting together this blog, one of the big questions I had coming in is, and this is, we think it's an easy answer, but really is it? Some of the travelers want to know, am I supposed to give you my time card to sign? And what if I'm working on a Saturday night and you're not back until Monday? And then who can sign it? Can the manager? Well, if it's a weekend, then can the assistant? Who signs it? I mean, that's basically what they're asking, because old school, again, I'm older, we had paper time cards. We used to have that and we would fax them in. But now more and more, is it on a mobile app? Or do I get a badge, like a real badge as an employee, as a traveler contractor? Do I scan in like a regular employee, or do I have to take it to the staffing response office, which sometimes happens, and that could be on the 7th floor, up in the middle of 2 units. So there are so many things that you think of that you don't think of that can happen. And a big question too, when I would go down, and we'll talk about it here, actually on this slide, one of the things I heard too is, I don't even know who I'm supposed to ask for. Does anybody even know I'm coming to orientation? And this again is another big, huge shout out to you guys. Just in the last couple of months, I know that Gypsy Nurse put out a poll, recently asking, what do you find? I think it's, what do you find to be the most stressful about being a travel nurse? And so far and away, the biggest one that I remember seeing was where to find housing. Next up was learning where everything is, meeting new people, and figuring out where to go. But here's the one comment that blew me away. It literally stopped me in my tracks. One of the biggest responses was that the biggest stressor to them was the unknown. They thought, one of the comments said, I'm afraid this new manager is going to make my job even more difficult. And then someone else said, what if somebody on the staff, right, tries to set me up to get me fired? They said hostile environment, time and time again. And for me, my heart just goes out to you, to my travel, family. And so this is why I want to go there today. I want to go there and talk about these stressors. And here, what happens if? Let's back up even further. So what happens if my assignment is canceled and I'm already here? What if housing fell through or it's not available, even though they told me it was available and I put a travel down, right? That happens. What happens if I'm sick? Who do I call? Is it somebody on site, or do I call a recruiter? And will they cancel me if I do get sick and need a day off? And how's that going to impact my reputation? And what are they going to think about me if I'm really considering, wanting to be hired here because I really like it? So is this going to impact their consideration of me for a future hire? So many of these things, that come to mind for me. And there's so much more to consider. And a lot of this, I feel like in so many ways, you guys are shouldering this on your own. And this is where I want to talk about that lifeline. My friends, this is where I want to share with you that your lifeline on the inside is truly your educator. Here's why. Here's what I mean. Your clinical educators, and I'm going to put my CE hat back on, okay? We are in lockstep with the clinical managers and human resources, all of them. We know which managers are hiring, when they're interviewing, and for which positions. We know when the offer has been extended and accepted or rejected. When I talk about orientation, I would intentionally, our entire education leadership team, both in the acute and the executive leadership in the PAC space, we would intentionally reach out to all the new hires and extend our own warm welcome and detail everything that they can expect for the entire onboarding and precepting experience and more. I'm talking about where to park, what to wear, what to bring for the first week of onboarding. We even gave them lunch the first few days. Doubt that's happening anymore because of the pandemic, but you see where I'm going here. It's the connection. I would literally speak to every one of my new hires and ask them, tell me about any planned vacations or vacation or time off you have planned during your first 90 days, because I'm going to coordinate that with your preceptor, because your personal time and your work-life balance is important to me. So we made sure that we had preceptors that could sync up if a new hire had to be out. I had one that was getting married and was going to be getting married and on her honeymoon. And I thought, well, just take me with you and I'll facilitate your orientation on the boat.
We see that a lot, Trish. That's another point that I'm glad you're making. We see that a lot, which is the aspect of somebody starting a new assignment, but there are personal commitments and holidays and other things planned that they need to weave into that assignment. And the aspect of trying to coordinate that miscommunication, the facility being upset, the agency not knowing, that creates a lot of turmoil, and we see that an awful lot in our discussion group as well.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And for me, it's the ultimate respect to ask the new person coming in,
Mm-hmm.
I want to welcome you to it was for me, it was UNC Rex Healthcare here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I would always say, my goal is to help you feel like you are already part of the UNC Rex family. And that includes all the travelers. I will never forget. One of the other things I would tell them too is I will always meet you. Either myself or one of my colleagues from the education team will meet you between 8:15 and 8:30 on the very first day before you get into orientation. And then we'll come back with you during the first break. And so I wanted to give them a foundation for what that experience would look like and to get to know who I am and who, the critical care team is or the education team from the ED. I wanted to make sure they understood this. And I'm telling you, my friends, I did this for every new hire for years, including all the travelers we brought in. I'll never forget, there was one opportunity we had. It was in the springtime. Don't ask me how I know it was in springtime. It was. We've onboarded in 1 week for our service line, our med-surg service line. We onboarded 75 new staff. And
Wow.
of that, we had 30 travelers.
Wow.
And it was absolutely my responsibility. It was my gift to personally welcome every single one of them. And again, make them feel like they're part of the family. But to your point, Steve, this is not always the case though. It's really, sometimes orientation can be a breeze, and other times it can be a hot mess. It really can. If you think about where we are today, you may get maybe a 1 or 1.5 day orientation. You'll get a ton more of, virtual education to do with your LMS. You'll get a whirlwind tour of your unit, and you may be given a patient assignment with your preceptor, and 1 day later, there you are. You're on your own. So I can't really offer you specific guidance on some of what we've just discussed, specific questions about maybe housing or timing for your assignment. That person's going to be your recruiter. But for those times when you are in your work environment, your clinical educator is going to be your ally. And so here's what I want to open it up, if we can, Steve, to the chat, to go into the comments here.
Sure.
So I would love to know from my travel nurse family over here, what would it mean to you? What would it mean to have someone who's ready to greet you in such a personal way, where you would you feel welcomed? Would you feel valued? Would it be helpful to you to have somebody on the inside to help you navigate this unfamiliar territory? I don't know if I can see the comments or not. So just, I guess.
We'll go through them with you,
Okay.
Trish, and I know Rachel's there as well. So we'll go through them with you. I can see them. So we're getting some great comments. No direct questions as of yet, but we would certainly encourage people to ask questions. I'll just give you a couple of, as we're kind of checking through the halfway point here, we're getting some great appreciative comments. People are saying they're excited for the session. Fred says nurses deserve all of the praise and more, Trish, that you had mentioned earlier. Katia says, thank you so much for this insightful information. So there's definitely people that are appreciating what you were bringing to the table here. For me, and I don't want to speak on behalf of our community, but having been an observer of this community for a number of years now, again, I go back to the fact that, we see orientation and onboarding as kind of I don't want to say a make or break, but if our observations are that if you have a successful onboarding experience, just like any job anywhere else in the private sector or whatever, if you have a successful onboarding experience, it just makes your journey that much easier. Conversely, if you have a poor onboarding experience, you're really 2 steps behind everybody else. And when you're talking about a travel nurse that is only there for a finite period of time, usually 13 weeks or perhaps less, boy, what an uphill battle it is to get over that poor onboarding experience. And from my perspective, that to me would be not an easy point, but a point that should be kind of rock solid. Knowing who to talk to, having your educator, reach out to you, make you feel welcome, make you feel part of the family. Unfortunately, we don't see that as we work in conversations within our community. And in fact, it many times can be the opposite. They totally confused. They didn't know where to go in their first day.
Yeah.
Scrub color, who to speak to. People, many times we see it being, reported that they showed up and people were like, who are you and why are you here? Or actually, your orientation session is next week, not
Yep.
today. I mean, crazy types of scenarios that you think you went through all the trouble to get the assignment, the credentialing, finding the right fit, the application, interviews, all that stuff. You get there, all that hard stuff is done, and then the onboarding of the orientation falls apart. So it's just, we feel badly there's not a lot that we can do from the gypsy nurse perspective other than provide resources and insight and perspective and kind of peer-to-peer guidance. But boy, very discouraging to observe that sort of interaction.
Oh, 100%. And I so appreciate your comments about that. And my heart again, goes out to my travel nurse family, across the virtual waves here. I wish we were in person, but hopefully we'll be able to get back to that at some point. But I think about it again, back to when I was, in education, and how important it was for me to literally reach out from the moment, like I said, our educators know which positions are hiring for sometimes we're helping do the interview panels. Then we go through the process of hiring. We know who's accepted, and we work in lockstep with HR as well. So as soon as we get the A-OK that their licenses have checked out, I'm on the phone. I'm sending emails. I'm connecting. And some of them are like, I've never been treated like this before. Are you a real person? I'm like, this is what UNC does. This is how important education is, in the sense that we are dedicated to taking care of all of our new hires coming in to welcome them to the new environment. And it goes for travelers too. Travel nurses, you guys are critical, you are needed, but you don't always hear that thank you or that value. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you're here. Let me take you under my wing. It's literally, and we'll go to that in a second. Speaking of the bedside, let's go ahead and go to.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody would like to chat, please feel free to jump in. But in the interest of time, we'll continue to move through, Trish.
I did. I just saw the time too. My apologies.
Not at all. This is great information. The community needs it. So we love it.
Absolutely. And it's literally, this is so funny. I mean, we're just talking about, the bedside reality. It's kind of culture shock. It's not really what I expected. Let's go ahead and go to the bedside. Let's say you made it through. Thank you, Jesus. You made it through to orientation, right? You got there. You walk on the unit and you're like, where do they keep the IV Star kits?
Right.
Did they tell me we had a blanket warmer? Do we have that?
Right.
Where's the warmer for the PD fluid? We do PD, right? Somebody said we do peritoneal dialysis. Where's the linen cart? Okay, that's right. It's in the clean utility room, and I just need to figure out where that is again. And I'm thinking, as you all are thinking, good grief, they're going to get so tired of you very, very quickly for asking so many questions. And here's something that you guys in the audience, comment and chat me up here. Keep me honest. Here's a situation. I know they're getting tired of me because I just saw Susan duck into the patient room because she saw me coming down the hall again. It happens.
Yeah.
It happens. And that's where I look to my nurse colleagues in post-acute and acute, and I'm like, guys, why are we doing this to each other?
Right.
Why is it still acceptable to do this bullying? And I call it that because that's what it is. And it's not lost on me that this is still the experience today. And I've been doing this a really long time. And so my gift and being offered the opportunity, again, thank you to Rachel and Steve and the Gypsy Nurse community for allowing me to come in to talk about this, because I want to bring in, even more of the experiences that you guys are seeing. And I want to make this I want to do a course correct, if you will.
Yeah.
So we'll talk again about another situation that you might find yourself in. When I was a nurse volunteer early in the pandemic, I'm still a volunteer today, but early in the pandemic, and I'm in the nursing homes, and I'm like, I can't find my PPE. They didn't know I was coming as a volunteer. The state had no idea that I was coming in. I would go down the hall, and maybe you're in the hospital and you go down to, are you supposed to get a sterile supply and go pick up your daily supply? And then is it going to be there for you? Do you have to keep it all shipped and then bring it downstairs? Is it going to be on the unit? And how do I even get to sterile supply? It's not always in the same location in each hospital.
Right.
Here's something else. Given that the pandemic is in the 3rd year, where do you go for support when you've just watched someone else, another patient, pass away because of the COVID pandemic? That is post-traumatic stress in a nutshell. Or what happens if you are a victim of abuse from a patient or a resident, if you're in a nursing facility, whether it's verbal or physical, it is still abuse. And then how do you manage all of your personal stress? Here's the thing, who's in it for you when you're the one that needs help? What do I have and who do I have in my emergency kit? What if you're miserable because you signed a contract, you're committed, right? Or are you? Or what if the agency tells you that they're going to be penalized if you decide to cancel? So there's all this pressure on you to just stay the course and make it work. So, I would ask, and for the sake of time, just, keep me honest, chat in your comments there. Unfortunately, I'm sure this is probably ringing true for some of you. And then something else too, with out of scope. What happens if you're given an assignment that you consider to be unsafe? Time and time again, I'm hearing stories of patient assignments in critical care, a 1-to-4 ratio in critical care. And it stops me in my tracks. I'm like, what if you're being asked to do this? It's out of scope. What do you do? But it's what they're expecting of you.
Yeah, we see that a lot, Trish, again, in our interactions, in our discussion groups and so forth. We see that an awful lot. And I think it's probably, in some respects, part and parcel with travel nursing is they feel, well, let's have the travel nurse do that. It's almost like this, let's just offload it to the travel nurse. They're only going to be here for 13 weeks anyway, but yet travel nurses find themselves in very, very difficult situations, whether it is an unsafe nurse to patient ratio, whether it is we can hear this all the time, being asked to float to an area that is outside of their clinical expertise, and how do they react to that? And if they are asked to float and it's something they're not comfortable with, what do they do? Where do they go? So we see that all the time, kind of these curveballs, if you will. And it's like, I know what I'm supposed to do in a particular clinical situation, but when you throw me into an unsafe environment, or you throw me into an area that I'm not familiar with, you're putting me in a tough spot. So I don't know what your advice or experience is there, but yeah, we see that all the time.
All the time. And it brings me back to when I was a manager in the acute space at Rex. And one of the units that I helped manage from an education and leadership perspective was our staffing response team.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made sure that if someone was going to float to another unit, or maybe we had a staffing response member that was going to come in, but they were only med-surg designated, and in their competencies, that's their box, right? They're med-surg only, but they're coming to the intermediate unit. So as a manager for those areas, I would say, and I would go to our charge nurse and say, we're going to give that traveler or SRT nurse, they're going to get the med-surg patients, but not the higher acuity intermediate care. And let's say you have someone who's lower acuity in the intermediate level, but still needs peritoneal dialysis, then either I would come in and do the PD for them, or I would have the charge nurse come in and do the PD for them. But then the staff nurse coming in as a float or traveler would only cover the med-surg aspects of care for the patient. Anything higher acuity would be on the back of, or on the license and credentials of the one who can safely care for that person. And that doesn't always happen, though. It doesn't always happen. And so that the norm is now, it's like you go to where you go and you just do. And I think that it's so unfortunate, and it's such a disservice, because it puts us in a hard place, because you don't want to say no.
Right.
But what I call it like the little nursing hairs. I'm sitting here scratching the back of my neck, but the
Right.
nursing hairs in the back of your neck go up and you're like, I don't think that's right. And then,
It's-
you know, what, oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead,
No, I
Steve.
was just going to say, so how do you, one of the things that we hear from organizations that we partner with and some of our travel nurse mentors, very experienced travel nurses, as we talk about the aspect of being flexible and the importance of being flexible. But how would you define being flexible versus something that's out of scope
Mhm.
and you need to raise your hand to say, I'm uncomfortable with this. Can you give me some perspective on that? Because I hear this flexibility, and then I hear out of scope. And how do you
Yeah.
mix the two?
Yeah. Oh, such a perfect question. You know, because what happens when you do have those disagreements with the doctors or your peers, or have
Right.
questions about hospital policies and things that you're being asked to do that you're like, not only are the nursing hairs going up on the back of your
Right.
neck, you're thinking my license is in jeopardy, and worse
Right.
yet, you're putting the patient at jeopardy.
Yep.
So where do you go? What do you
Right.
do? And it's so funny because the thing is we're going to get to that here in a second too. The biggest thing I can recommend and suggest and champion for is for all of you that have those questions and concerns, go right back to your lifeline, because I would have nurses come to me and ask me, I don't think it's appropriate for me to be, for me to have been assigned this patient when I've not been credentialed, I have not been competencied,
Right.
do, I don't want to give a bad example, but let's just say maybe you're being asked to do peritoneal dialysis
Mhm.
and you've not been deemed competent to do PD. Because PD is different from HT. You can prep and recover a patient from hemodialysis if you're not doing the hemodialysis, which is a whole other, set of
Mhm.
skills and training. But let's say you get an assignment on an intermediate floor for a peritoneal dialysis patient, and you're going to be you're not going to do the cycle. You're actually going to be doing the peritoneal dialysis for that patient every 2 to 4 hours. And you're like, I don't know how to do PD. I did it once in school, like 12 years ago, for example. I would encourage each and every one of you guys, if you can't get to your charge nurse, go to your educator. Because your educator is going to be your advocate. Your educator is the one that's going to pull those files to validate for you and show that nurse manager that's trying to assign that case to you, this nurse doesn't have the competencies for it. It's not that he doesn't want to do it. Bill doesn't want to do it. He'd love to, but it's not safe.
Yeah.
So that is where your clinical educator comes in to be that safe space and lifeline to be able to go through and say, I'm going to be the advocate for you, to be able to be that buffer so that you can go to your educator. They can then present that case to you and for you, so that you don't jeopardize the patient's safety and care
Yeah.
quality and outcomes, and you definitely don't jeopardize your license,
Yeah.
because you may be in a different state that maybe they say you can do PD if you have like 1 hour training. I don't know, I'm just giving it, hypothetical, but you've got to have that training documented, and your educator is your go-to data validator for all
Yeah.
of that. And they will go to that charge nurse, they will go to that nurse manager, because they have relationships with them. Every day they work with them. So they will be there for you. That's your lifeline. If that ever happens, and unfortunately it is happening, my hope and prayer is that it
Does.
stops happening.
Mhm.
But the true transparency, not only we're going to talk about fully transparent salary, but full transparency and scope of practice and competency levels, that lies within the scope, if you will, of your educator. He or she or they are responsible for that. So go to your lifeline in confidence. That educator, I can say in my experience, I never betrayed a confidence. If someone came to me, they might go, down the hall, pick up one of the phones, or call me or text me, old school, and page me, and I would say, let's go meet. We'd go meet
Yeah.
over in the stairwell, or they'd say, I'll meet you in the cafeteria in 5 minutes, or I'll meet you, in the clean utility room,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about it. I will then go and advocate on their behalf. So that's, again, it happens. It's unfortunate. My prayer is that it stops happening, but
Yeah.
your clinical educator is definitely your go-to. Definitely.
Well, Trish, you're getting a lot of compliments. We've had a couple people say that where were you when they were early in their travel nursing career? They would have loved to have worked with you as their guide.
Oh my
Rachel
God.
says, "I'd love to have you as a personal guide in my life, let alone my travel nursing life." So, yeah, so kudos to you. Just want to do a time check, Trish. Want to make sure we get through this great content. We've got about 15 minutes left or so. So definitely want to make sure that we get to all this great content.
I do too. I appreciate it. And for sake of transparency, we're going to skip fully transparent salary.
Okay.
Just know that the comment I wanted to share was that, sometimes you're going to hear, here's a comment. Jackie just told me she heard Melinda say that she overheard
Yes.
Sam, who told her that he heard their manager just hired 4 travelers at $120 an hour.
Right.
That never happens, but it does. It happens.
Right.
My hope is to move quickly here. My hope is that the general public gets a better understanding of all of
Yeah.
the expenses that you shoulder on your own.
Yeah.
That your
And
hourly wage is like a total pay package, is how I see it.
a public service announcement too. We've got a number of articles and some infographics on the Gypsy Nurse site, thegypsynurse.com, that will talk about how you actually break down your pay and what goes into your pay package. So, right, for those that think all that $120 is going to the nurse, it doesn't work that way. So,
Absolutely. No, and again, I mean, I can't stress enough, I mean, how impressed I am with your site and the resources that
thank
you
you.
have. It really has opened my eyes to so much, again, having been on the inside and then
Yeah.
learning here during the pandemic and as a travel volunteer, I guess, throughout the state and just hearing the stories. There's so much that we could get into, and I would love to do this again, in the future. I do
Let's do it.
have a couple more things I wanted to bring
Hmm.
up for you guys. Um, and again, I want to, thank you for sharing everything. I appreciate all the comments and the full transparency on your end. We've talked about how challenging it is to adjust to a new environment. You may have some very challenging coworker personalities. You feel as though maybe everybody represents you, just your presence kind of sets them off. They don't take you seriously. They know you're essential, but you certainly don't feel like you are. You're not treated like you are. So, here's the thing, you got to maintain your composure. How do you remain calm when everything happens like this? Your everyday reality includes your peers who are sometimes less than kind and create a hostile work environment. They may treat you, like you're an outsider but if you think about it, we're really all on the same team.
Hmm.
We're all nurses, our everyday is filled with stress and frustration, and you very rarely hear thank you. And that's why I started out with that, because I know I never heard it enough. And it's not what we're in it for, but when
Right.
you hear it, it matters. It resonates. And we are, and you guys are seeing it too, we are burning out and we are leaving the bedside in greater numbers than I've ever seen in my career. And there's also an increased hesitancy to even take the leap to get in to nursing school. And we don't even have time, Steve, to talk about the critical shortage of
Yeah.
nurses in academia. We just don't.
It's one of the reasons why there's not enough nurses out there, is because
Oh,
it's not for a lack of people applying. There's just not enough nurse educators out there to bring them through the schooling process.
it's true. And
Yeah.
here's something else to think about too. Um, with the increased hesitancy to even get in, take the leap to get into school, I have colleagues of mine, friends of mine, that have told me, they're like, Trish, I love teaching so much. They actually have taken a $40,000 and more a year pay cut to go
Wow.
back into academia. So one of the things, within the state of North Carolina and on a national level, we are raising the awareness of the critical shortage of nurses in academia. And we want to raise the salaries for those to get back into it, to say, I'll leave the bedside, I'll leave my, non-traditional career that I'm in to go back and teach, because it matters.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say there's a lot of opportunity. Let's just say it there. And I know that the everyday, lived realities that we are living today, they are going to get better because we're nurses. We are going to persevere. But real quickly, I know we're getting short on time, but I want you guys to think about this for a second. Think about the ways that you remain calm in your everyday. The way that I do that when I'm stressed out, when I, had a bad experience at the bedside, or, had coworkers that were, less than kind, what did I used to do? What did I do when I was at the bedside, right? To reset my internal space, if you will. I would go back and remember why I chose to become a nurse. I would intentionally recenter myself, look inward, and remember my why. And then I would reach out to my friends to unwind and have a glass of wine and then clear my head. Because when you think about your whys, supporting others in successfully navigating the journey to, I call, holistic health and wellness, helps me to recenter and go, I can persevere through anything because I'm in it for that patient. You know, talk with your colleagues, find ways to debrief. So think about it. I was hoping we'd have more time for a chat, but we won't. But I would encourage you guys to think through the feelings and emotions that you're bringing home with you long after you clock out, because I know that you're doing that. I've been there. Think through what you need to do to reset your internal compass, recenter yourself, focus on your why, reach out, go get some support, think of self-care and those free moments you have, very few and far between, and go to your clinical educator because they have those resources to support you. They can work with the managers. In some cases, we would try to find ways to bring in an SRT or staffing response nurse to come in to allow someone to go off a shift, to go ahead and say, you do what you need to do. We're going to pull an SRT in for the remainder of your 7P to 11P shift. We got you. Go ahead, go home. But your educator is going to be your lifeline for all of that.
Yeah. So important. And just as an aside, the gypsy nurse is a great resource for support and self-care and mental health for travel nurses. Because just saying, Trish, you know better than I do, but mental health, well-being, work-life balance, if you will, that's always been a challenge for nurses. But within the past 2 years, it's only gotten worse. And we're hearing, we did our virtual conference, as you know, back earlier this spring. We had Ron Blake come in from the American PTSD Association, who gave a talk on post-traumatic stress syndrome, specific to healthcare workers. We've had articles on mental health. I mean, it's such an issue right now in the community. And I think people sometimes forget about it. We were talking before we came on live, and we're talking about nurses care for others, but who cares for the nurse? And nurses do need to practice self-care. I think it's so important because there's so much burnout now. There's so many mental health issues. People really need to, I think travel nurses really need to pay attention to what's going on with their own lives, what's going on with their own mental health, their own physical health, and make sure they're getting the support that they need and don't hesitate.
That's it. Yes, 1,000%. Yes, absolutely. And that, again, I think about those resources in the hospital or in a nursing home setting, wherever you're being placed. Your clinical educator is going to be your trusted partner. They have the expertise to help you become empowered in your everyday and help you realize the very best travel experience possible, which very quickly brings me to these trip tips that I wanted to leave you with. And I want to think about, that unfamiliar territory again, just to circle back. You're preparing for orientation. Your recruiter still hasn't shared any of the information with you. Here's a trip tip. If you know your unit, call the hospital. Ask for that nurse's station. Ask the unit clerk or tech to connect you with the educator or manager. That's the easiest way. You're starting, you know your unit that you're going to, but you don't know anything else about orientation. Call the hospital and ask for some assistance. Let's say, I'm going to move very quickly here. Let's say you get to the hospital, you walk up to that check-in desk at orientation, you're greeted by an HR rep. And Steve, you touched on this earlier. That rep is welcoming all new hires. And guess what? They don't have you on the list.
You're not in the list.
I'm like, you were reading my notes here, friend. Your name has been left off that proverbial
welcome to everybody except you. I don't know who you are.
You're like, who are you again? I'm like, hold on a minute. So you contact your recruiter and they're like, dude, you were good. I had you. They knew you were coming. And then you don't talk to that person anymore. Here's another trip tip. Ask to speak with the human resources manager or clinical educator or your unit manager. And the reason I say that is, in my experience, there have been many, many times where nurses were moved to a different orientation schedule, or sometimes their background or health screenings that you have to go to, that they actually came back, all those screenings came back after the final HR guest list was approved. So this is where you empower yourselves, advocate for yourselves in the moment. Connecting with the hospital insiders is key. Another quick concern here. Let's assume everything went really well, when you got there, or are they? Hopefully you had somebody greet you at the first break or mid-morning at the latest. Typically, you're going to have somebody from clinical education. Sometimes your HR manager will your unit manager may greet you on your very first day. But what if nobody's there?
Yeah.
You're on the list, but nobody came to greet you. What if it's at the first break and you're literally the only nurse still sitting at the table? Here's another trip tip. Go to the HR rep that's still in the room. They should still be in there at least through lunch to go through those issues with anybody who wasn't able to connect right away. They'll get you to the right person. Here's another, let's go to bedside reality. You're in your work environment, right? You're on your unit. Here's an issue. During orientation, your educator should have taken you on a tour of the unit and shared all those room lock codes with you, pointed out where you could find, patient nourishment or the staff bathroom and lockers. And another little fun fact here, every one of our travelers had their own lockers. That was before the pandemic, but we made sure everybody had a locker because we cared about them. I don't know that they have the space to do it anymore, but that's kind of an old school mentality that I am prayerful will come back around for you all. You've got the codes for the storage room, the JIC cart, and more. But what if they didn't give you any of these codes and you're struggling, you need to start an IV stat, you're going in, or you got somebody coming up, an admission from the ED, and you need the additional, PPE, you need your, yellow gowns, isolation gowns. So, I hope you all know that unit secretary, who we know pretty much runs the unit, has your back. And let me tell you, that unit secretary is so thankful that you are there. They are absolutely there to help you so that you're a little less overwhelmed. So here's another thing too. We talked a little bit earlier, we're getting so close on time. A little bit earlier, we talked about overtime. If you have disagreements with doctors or peers, or you have questions about hospital policies, last trip tip here, phone a friend. Call your educator. Your educator is absolutely your lifeline. We got one more thing here. We've talked about as well, what if you are there and you're really enjoying your experience? It's been one heck of a ride and you want to stay just a little bit longer. You love it that much. An extra trip tip, let your educator know you want to stay on, because we know who's going to be opening up positions. We know what's going to be coming open. We know if we have a new short stay unit that we're going to be opening up. Quick example, I had the occasion working with a phenomenal nurse. We contracted for 13 weeks. His contract ended and he approached us to say, he's like, Trish, I specifically asked to be placed at Rex because I know of your reputation and I want to work here. So I wanted the travel experience so I could eventually get hired permanently. Yeah. And after the 6-month waiting period, right? Because sometimes you have a waiting time before you can be poached, if you will.
Yeah.
After the 6-month waiting period, we welcomed him right back through orientation, and this time as a full-time UNC Rex nurse on the very unit that he fell in love with. So I want you to, I know we're running so short on time. I had a quick quote, but you guys will get that slide deck, but I wanted to let you guys know, feel free to connect with me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Here is my code here. You've got my contact information as well. I know we've given you guys the slide deck. I know we have like a minute left, but Steve and Rachel, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to come in and talk with, my travel nurse family from around the country. And I would love the opportunity to connect with any or all of you, offline. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's connect and continue the offline discussion. And I look forward to the opportunity to, speaking with your audience again and supporting all of the amazing work that the Gypsy Nurse is doing. My hat goes off to you all for everything that you do to support my travel brothers and sisters out in the community. So thank you again for the opportunity today.
Thank you so much, Trish. And one thing, you talked about being alone, you don't want to be alone, is, as a travel nurse, you are alone a lot. So it's very important for you to find somebody out there to kind of be that resource. So reach out to anybody to help you out and find your guide. And you well said.
Great point. Yeah, no. And Trish, on behalf of the Gypsy Nurse team, thank you so much for bringing this great information to our audience. It's too many comments to read through right now, but so many people are just appreciative of not only the information that you've brought to the table, but also too for your experience and what you've done for nursing and what you've done, throughout your career in nursing. So we're very fortunate to have somebody of your expertise and experience provide that information to our community. We absolutely will have you back. We will set something up and have you back again. We'd love to have you, as a regular contributor to our community. So hopefully we can count on that. But this was a fantastic session, great information. For those that are joining us late, this will be made available on demand on our website, thegypsynurse.com. So we encourage you to be a registered member of our site, and you'll be able to get access to great presentations like this and a lot of other special stuff that only you can find out about. But Trish, once again, thank you so much for your time and the information provided, and we really look forward to having you back again on a Gypsy Nurse Live session coming up soon.
Yes, definitely.
Greatly.
Thanks so much. Thank you everyone for joining us.